Okay. Okay, good afternoon. Thanks everybody for coming. Take time out of your day. We're going to kick this off. I'm Brett Bradford with Copper River Prince William Sound Marketing Association. Appreciate everybody coming to the 2025 Salmon Harvest Task Force meeting. We're going to get started with a roll call. Kelsey, you want to call the roll? Oh boy. Stand by.
Ham 2's Wild Alaska Seafoods.
Yeah,
Tyler?
Tyler here. You got me, Kelsey?
Yep.
Here.
Copper River Prince William Sound Marketing Association.
Here.
Copper River Seafoods. CDFU.
Here. Zeke Brown, same. Darren Gilman, Gilnet.
Native Village of Eac. OBI Seafoods.
Here.
Piswak.
Here.
Prince William Sound AC.
Here.
Prince William Sound SetNet Association. Silver Bay Seafoods. 60 North Seafoods.
Here.
Trident Seafoods.
Here.
And VFDA.
Here.
Okay, thanks, Kelsey. Let's see. Next on the agenda is chair announcements. I don't have any announcements. We're gonna, we've got a few action items and then we'll go into updates from Fish and Game and hatchery management. And we'll talk about some things, discussions about king salmon management and everything else. You can get copies of the agenda. I think they're over on that table. So first item up, to approve the agenda, I need a motion.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve this meeting agenda. Any additions or comments? Go ahead, Darren.
I had one amendment under Gilnet, section 3 for coho. It should read recommending flying more frequently coho index streams, not more coho index streams. If you fly more, it raises the
Right.
goal.
Gotcha. Okay, got that noted. Any other comments? Questions? Here? Anything online? All right. So any objections to approving the agenda for today? Without objection, today's agenda is approved. Next item up is an action item to approve the minutes from the spring of 2024. Need to get a motion on that.
So moved.
Second.
Brett,
Moved and seconded
I actually had a comment on some of the minutes.
from 2024.
Yeah, for a correction.
Okay,
It's page 8 of the packet, but page 5 of the minutes.
got it.
Under number 4 in that page, the last sentence. I talked with Kelsey about this and I was not able to go back and listen to the audio, but I'm positive that is not what I said. And she did listen to the audio and came up with something else, so I'll leave the wording to her, but
Okay, so we can strike that last sentence.
I think you can just add "I hope" to the beginning of the sentence.
Yeah, okay. That sounds good. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Anything else from you? Okay. Any other comments? Edits or from last year's, if we can remember that far back? Okay, any objections to approving spring 2024 minutes? Okay. Those are approved. All right, next item up is action item to recognize the 2025 Salmon Harvest Task Force member roster, and that's on page 11 of the packet. There's a recommended motion at the top of that page, it looks like. Is that what we're doing here, Kelsey? 12? Yep, sorry, that's page 12 of the packet. So those are the members. This shows an action item. Does this list need to be approved or?
You guys usually approve it, yeah.
Okay. So I need a motion to approve this list.
Move to approve the task force member list for 2025.
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Any objections? Okay, hearing none. List is approved. All right, next item up is updates. We've got reports, outlooks. Each of these will be followed by a brief Q&A from task force members only. So starting off, we've got Tracy Hansen with some upriver management news. All right.
So, thanks for having me here. My name's Tracy Hansen. I'm the new area manager for the Division of Sport Fish for the Upper Copper, Upper Susitna management area based in the Glen Ellen office. My supervisor, Mark Somerville, recently retired like 3 days ago. So I've just moved in there, but I've been working up there for about 6 summers now. So I have a short presentation, and while that's being pulled up, Mark has been preparing, little presentations, blurbs about what's happening upriver. And now we're here for like the 5th time. So after the meeting or anything like that, if you guys don't want to see this in the future or like me to focus on other things, please let me know and I'm willing to accommodate or whatever is most insightful to you guys. So
Okay, thanks. Can you guys hear her okay out?
I can try to get this a little better. I'm looking the other way, so
There we go.
I'm not trying to ignore anybody.
Okay, so you've got a presentation there, Lo.
Yeah, sorry you're gonna have to crick your neck, but hopefully it won't be too long. Brittany is gonna be clicking for me. Make it a little simpler. And so I don't have much for you guys today. I just wanted to give a little brief overview of what's been happening in the upriver subsistence and personal use salmon fisheries. And, basically what changes we have looking forward for fisheries management this summer due to the recent Board of Fisheries meeting in December. So next slide, please. So as you all are aware, there's a pretty big personal use dip net fishery in the Chitna subdistrict. And so if I ever say Chitna subdistrict or personal use fishery, those things are kind of synonymous, they're one and the same. There are some federal subsistence fishery occurring in the Chitna subdistrict, but mainly like 98% of the participation in harvest is just by the state fisheries. So over the past few years, folks have been concerned about a shift in permits fish from shore to boat. So here in this figure here, the light, I guess that looks purple on this screen compared to the lines. The light purple of the bars are permits fished from shore, and those fish from boat are those little horizontal lines. And basically, over the past several years, there has been an increase in number of permits fished from boats, but still the fishery is predominated by shoreline access. And for the last, 10 years or so, we're usually seeing about 6,000 households fishing permits. Next slide, please. So with that, there's been a lot of conversation. There are some guided charters that offer dip netting from a boat for a fee, as well as transporters. So here for last year, and we had in total, nearly 4,000 permits fished from shore and 2,000 permits fished from boat, which is kind of that pattern we just saw. And the personal use fishery last year harvested a lot of salmon, about 100 and this is just, salmon, 175,000. And Of those, still, we just started tracking this data last year, most of those people participating in the fishery are not paying for a guide or a transporter service. You can see there's nearly 3,300 permits fished from shore by private citizens or households, and about 1,300 from boats, and they're taking about 2/3 of that harvest. But there is definitely some permit holders that, appreciate the commercial services. Like the transporter shore service, that's a big name, is HEMS. You've maybe heard of them up there. We have about 550 permits fishing from shore and harvesting about 18,000 salmon. And then the boat dip net charters, which I think there's 3, maybe 4 guides operating out there. They took out about 750 permit holders and took about 25,000 salmon. If you can click, Brittany. So what does that actually mean? And if you click one more time, that's pretty much showing that 65% of the permits fished in the Chitina subdistrict are, taking 60% of the king salmon and sockeye salmon harvest from shore. And if you click one more time, only 9% of the permits fished actually use a transporter service, and they're taking less than 10% of the sockeye and king salmon harvest in that fishery. And lastly, if you click one more time, charters from a boat, less than 15% of permit holders actually use that guided service, and they're, taking about 15% of the sockeye and less king salmon in that fishery. Next slide. So now that we talked about the personal use fishery, I'll just bombard here into the Glen Ellen subdistrict. So if you click, Brittany, here's a table of the line represents number of permits fished in the subsistence fishery. And if you guys aren't aware, the Glen Ellen subdistrict is where the subsistence fishery occurs. And there's quite a bit of state and federal permit holders there. And you can choose to use a dip net or a fish wheel. And we have seen over the past couple decades, there's been a big increase in the number of dip netters fishing in the subsistence fishery upriver. The solid line here represents the number of permits fished by the fish wheel gear type, and that's declined by nearly half. I think last year we had like the lowest number of fish wheels registered, I think 91. In the heyday, there was, 300 fish wheels registered or more. And so we're seeing a big shift in gear type in that subsistence fishery upriver. If you click one more time, then we'll go into what harvest is. And so what we're looking at here, the bars corresponds with the harvest on the right. And so basically, even though there's been a big increase in dip net fishers, they're looking like they've been harvesting at least the past 5 years, probably, 20,000 to 25,000 sockeye salmon. And if you click one more time, then we move into the fish wheel harvest. And fish wheels are very effective and can harvest quite a few fish. And with the decline in number of people fishing permits with fish wheels, we've seen a decrease in harvest overall. But still, in general, people are catching more fish with fish wheels than they are with dip nets. Next. So same deal here. That was for sockeye salmon, if I was unclear. And this is looking at king salmon. So basically, nothing's changed with the number of permits fished. And if Brittany clicks, we'll see here that, dip net fishers are taking, anywhere from probably the last 5 years, about 1,000 king salmon in the dip net fishery in this above the bridge. And then the fish wheels still continues to harvest more king salmon. Like I said, fish wheels are very effective and can harvest more fish. Moving on, you might have heard, and based on the recent board meeting, that there's been some concerns with folks not being able to meet their subsistence needs upriver. And so Mark put this together before he retired, but basically in the Glen Ellen subdistrict, which spans from the Chitina-McCarthy Bridge all the way up to the Slano River in the main stem copper, it's broken up into 3 sub areas. The bridge to Tonsina, which is from the Chitina-McCarthy Bridge to the confluence of the Tonsina River, the Tonsina to the Gacona River, which is like the middle river section, where the communities of Copper Center, Silver Springs, Copperville, Volcana all lie within, and then Gacona to Slana sub area, which is the uppermost region. And so I have these figures here on the right, which is basically showing plotting number of permits fished and the salmon harvested for that year. And you can overall see in general, between all three of those, there's, a linear line if you just were to draw, like if you put a best fit line in there. And so what makes sense, when more people participate in fisheries, more salmon are harvested. The dots represent the fishery type. So there are federal subsistence fisheries I mentioned. The yellow dots are the federal fisheries and the blue dots are the state fishery permit holders. And the red dots represent what actually happened in both of those fisheries last year. So, last year there was quite a few permits fished in the state fishery, that red dot over there, and they harvested, upwards of 40,000 salmon in the Bridge to Tonsina area. And very few federal permits actually fish in that lower area of the river. And then you can see as we move further up in the Tonsina and Gacona to Slana, you see more yellow dots presented in those figures. And basically that's more local rural residents that obtain a federal permit that fish there. And lastly, the Gacona to Slana sub area, you can see that their effort's pretty low compared to the past, as well as harvest is, a little lower than past years. So that wraps that up. So let's just quickly move into what changes in upriver fisheries management will be occurring this year. So at the recent board meeting, there's 3 major changes that impact the Chittenden personal use fishery, right? So they've delayed the opening date of the fishery. They've delayed king salmon retention date. And then they also gave us, the commissioner, authority to liberalize sockeye salmon limits in the Chittenden subdistrict. So Brittany, if you can click, we go into the next. So basically what this figure is showing, it's showing individual sockeye salmon stocks and their run timing, presumed run timing through the Chittenden subdistrict. So at the board, if many of you may have attended since it was here in Cordova, there's been a lot of concern about salmon not reaching the upper subdistrict, both sockeye and king salmon. And so the board adopted that we can no longer open the personal use fishery as early as June 7th. Previously, it had to be somewhere between June 7th and June 15th. We were mandated to have it opening. And now we can open no earlier than June 10th. And what's that done is allow some of the sockeye salmon to make it through the Chittenden subdistrict and move upwards. And you can see in general, like the yellow line, the light gray line, sorry, these colors are very muted and difficult, but the Taslina sockeye salmon stocks, the upper Copper River stocks in general, the fish that travel the furthest upriver enter the river sooner and move through this area before other lower river stocks. And perhaps by delaying the opening, they'll allow for those fish to move up into the Glen Ellen subdistrict. So that's delayed it by upwards of 3 days. And then if you move to the next slide, we did a similar restriction to not allow any Chinook salmon retention until July 1st. So this is basically a very similar run timing curve for individual stocks, Upper Copper, Taslina, Gulcana, Chittenden, et cetera, for king salmon. And you can see here, now that king salmon retention is not allowed until July 1st, that most of those salmon stocks for kings are actually moving through and have moved through the Chittenden subdistrict. I think I was looking at the harvest data this morning. On average, I think, nearly 72% of the total king salmon harvest in the personal use fishery is taken by July 1. So that's a pretty big reduction in that fishery. I think that's my last slide, but one other final thing to talk about, the third change, the authority to liberalize the sockeye salmon limits in the personal use fishery. The commissioner gained that authority at the board. And what that means for us for upriver management is that we would probably have to be projecting, over 1 million sockeye salmon into the river before we make that decision to perhaps liberalize, but also it's just a tool. We don't necessarily have to make or take management actions for that. And, before Mark retired, I was asking him, what does that look like? When would this kind of change happen? And based on previous years, like 2013, 14, and 15, when we had really strong sockeye salmon runs and, over 1 million fish in the river. It looks like we maybe liberalized the sport fishery in mid-June to early July. And in 2019, that was my first season. And we ended up liberalizing the sockeye salmon sport fishery then. And that happened in mid-July. So that's when we started projecting the large numbers of sockeye salmon and exceeding the escapement goal. So I just wanted to put that out there so you guys are aware. We'll just be monitoring and we'll see what happens. So that's really about it. Happy to answer any questions for you.
Thanks, Tracy. Anybody on the panel have questions for Tracy or comments about her presentation? Go ahead, Darren.
Yeah, I got a 3-part question, I guess, and thank you for the presentation. So in your slides there, it said 60% of the kings were caught shore-based, and I was wondering if you had any information on when the non-retention date went in, and was basically, is there more guides at a later date, and maybe those shore-based fishermen come on earlier?
Well, so generally, in the Chitina subdistrict, most king salmon, like I was kind of alluding to in the last slide, most of the king salmon harvest is happening in June. And when we look at effort, most of that's happening in June and the first half of July. And then pretty much after mid-July, we see a large reduction in effort. But as far as commercial charters operating and, how busy they are, I don't really have any of that information. Based on what I see down there, I feel like it's consistent. But I think mainly it's just there's more people fishing from shore, and that's why we're seeing more king salmon caught that way.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Do you have any data on caught and released king salmon from permit holders or charter operators or transporters, anything like that?
No, we do not.
Is that anything you would have the commissioner have authority to enforce?
Recording that? or-
Yeah, like, after the day is done, you bring back your clients and, we caught 5 kings, caught and released 5 kings. I feel like it could be something that we put on a permit.
Yeah, I haven't thought about that, but it would probably, just that thought reminds me of the freshwater guide logbook that they used to have. And that was something mandated and in regulation, and that went away, I believe, maybe in 2017. And so I'm not super familiar with that program and why it went away and the cost benefits and the best and not, good for it. But sorry, that was not a complete sentence, but that's not something we've been asking, and I don't know if we will, inquire about that. But it perhaps could be something implemented if, guide logbooks came back.
Yeah, just, we passed this regulation, no retention till July 1st, but I feel like that'd be some prudent information for the future to have. And I guess my last question kind of was answered by that I was wondering how you mitigate king caught and release with the upping the limits of the sockeye potentially, but I think you're not going to liberalize till late July, it sounds like.
Yeah, and mainly the majority of king salmon have already passed through the subdistrict there during that period.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Go ahead, Zeke.
Oh, yeah, thanks for coming. I just like to follow up on that a little bit. I guess that's my question is with this new July 1st date for retention of king salmon, do you have any concerns with catch and release mortality in that sockeye fishery or any way to track that?
No, unfortunately, we don't have any way to track that. There's an assumption that, most king salmon can be returned to the water unharmed, but we don't have any exact data on that.
Go ahead, John.
So it was informative to see all the in-river harvest separated out. It was sort of hard to infer from the data you presented, but it seems like in-river harvest is sort of increasing over time. Is that accurate? The scales of some of the charts were different, the y-axis.
Correct. So I believe that's the final, or the one with the 3 figures, Brittany. She's getting there. I think it's up.
It's.
Yeah, but the different sub areas.
It's about, but altogether in-river harvest has generally been increasing over the last 5, 10 years. Is that accurate?
I guess for the subsistence fishery,
For all in-river harvest, for personal use and subsistence?
I feel like the subsistence fishery has been pretty consistent. They harvest in general about 8% of the fish coming through the sonar.
Mhm.
I don't think we've been seeing any recent like high subsistence harvest. And the Chittenden personal use fishery has been harvesting about 20% of the sonar, 18%. But if we're talking about the 3 different sub areas, I'm not sure if that was the figure you're referring to. But basically is that lower effort's going to result in fewer fish harvested. Those what they're trying to show. I'm not sure if I answered your question or not, John.
I'm just wondering about overall harvest between subsistence and personal use in the river and how that's been trending, not as a proportion of escapement, but as overall.
I feel like it's been pretty consistent. I mean, if Brittany stops here, sockeye salmon harvest in the subsistence fishery for the last 5 years, I suppose there is a slight increase there. And perhaps it could be, more sockeye salmon in the river and it's driven mainly by abundance. But in general, I feel like it's been pretty consistent.
Certainly not declining. Thanks.
Anyone else? Questions?
Oh, sure.
Go ahead.
So Board of Fish, the big topic of the one proposal that from upriver was the declining fish catch by the furthest upriver federal users. So looking at that graph, is it fair to assume that a main reason or a big portion of why that's happening is due to less participation?
Correct. So there's been historically fewer permits fished in that upriver area in the recent past than ever before. And, effort drives harvest. And, there might be other factors influencing that, where the fish are running in the channel, where your fish wheel is. But in general, there's fewer people participating and fewer fish harvested.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna kind of piggyback on that and at Board of Fish, we heard several people testify to the fact that way up river, they're having a hard time filling their freezers. And like you just said, the department's response is, well, less effort equals less harvest. But I think what I'm hearing from users up there was that they're putting in the effort. There may be less permits issued, but the per hour results are down, and that was the concern. So that the testimony that I heard at Board of Fish sort of, it's different from what Mark's data shows as far as those pinpoints. So I get, where you guys are presenting, less harvest, less effort equals less harvest. So it doesn't seem to jive for me. But I did have another question, which was what's the percentage of reports on those subsistence and personal use permits that you guys are getting back right now? It's
Yeah.
pretty high, isn't it?
Yes, it's a very good reporting rate. We've implemented the failure report blacklist, right? So if you don't report on your permit, you don't get a permit next year. And that's really helped with compliance. I believe for 2024, the Chittenden subdistrict below the bridge, I think we had about 92.4% reporting compliance. And then in the subsistence fishery, something like 95%. For the state fishery, I'm not sure what the federal
Sure.
reporting rates are, but it's been great. Just merely six to 10 years ago, we were seeing 80% reporting rates. So
Right.
it's been drastically.
Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm gonna circle back to king retention in the river, and I was wondering, is something that your office could maybe have a volunteer reporting of caught or released kings? I mean, maybe not this year, might be a little hard to implement, but for the future, with the status of kings in the state, I think it's a prudent thing to have and be useful information for the future.
Yeah, I don't know if that'd be something we would implement or not. I really don't think so, but I do feel like we get some information by, dip netters and things like that, especially when it's closed and on retention, like, oh, we had to throw back kings or whatever like that, but
Yeah, just be, I guess, putting a numerical number on that versus just anecdotal is the whole point, I think. But anyways, thank you.
So, yeah, I agree with that. I think it seems like there could be a spot on the report for number of kings released, while dip netting. I don't know. Seems like it would be helpful. Any other questions for Tracy? Okay. Appreciate it, Tracy. Thanks for the presentation. Next up, Jeremy Boats.
Thank you. Jeremy Boats, Alaska Department of Fish and Game, area management biologist for salmon, gillnet, subsistence, and commercial here in Cordova. So today I'm going to go over a brief outline of the coming season. Please refer to the 2025 Prince William Sound Fisheries Information Announcement released last month for more detail on the gillnet fisheries season outlook. So I'm optimistic about this year's runs, that they will afford a regular fishing opportunity. The well above average forecasted sockeye salmon run to the Copper River speaks to 2 periods per week from the start of the season. Short duration 12-hour periods to start, and then longer duration periods if abundance indices and fishing efforts support liberalizing the fisheries. Inside closures will be in place early in the season based on the low Chinook salmon forecast and the small runs in recent years. The river is more open than it has been the last couple of years at this point, and I expect an early ice out considering the weather pattern so far this spring. Miles Lake sonar is projected to deploy tomorrow, and I expect that we will be able to splash the sonars as earlier than we have the last few years, and then solidly capture the start of the in-river passage. With the commercial fishery being delayed until May 22nd, evaluating in-river passage at the sonars will be the primary driver in assessing the earliest segment of the sockeye and Chinook salmon runs in the absence of commercial harvest data. Moving on to Port Chalmers, the Cog Hill District, and the Ishami District, these fisheries are anticipated to kick off on June 2nd, the Unaquik District fishery on June 16th. And all are expected to run with fishing periods starting concurrent with the Copper River District. The anticipated run to the Port Chalmers subdistrict is 780,000 chump salmon, and a weekly 60 to 84-hour fishing period schedule is anticipated throughout the run. The Ishami District fishery will likely be 2 24 to 36-hour fishing periods per week during the Main Bay Hatchery sockeye salmon run overlap. Hatchery cost recovery and broodstock needs are projected to be close to 27% of the anticipated run, and reducing fishing time and area closures are likely to only occur in the Main Bay subdistrict as long as the sockeye run tracks near or above forecast. From mid-July to the end of the season, the fishery will be driven by wild pink and sockeye salmon abundance. Another large Cog Hill Lake sockeye salmon run is forecasted this year, and Wally Norberg chum salmon is projected to be smaller than last year. And this will likely lead to a management scenario similar to or more conservative than 2024. The Wally Norberg hatchery cost recovery and brood are anticipated to be 65% of the chum salmon run and will likely necessitate extended closures of hatchery subdistricts to achieve these objectives. In waters of North Port Wells and College Fjord, 60 to 84-hour periods are anticipated from the start of the season to target Cog Hill Lake sockeye. Fishing time in the remainder of the general district waters will likely start out at 24 to 36 hours and be adjusted based on wild stock abundance as the season progresses. Fishing area will be expanded at the mouth of the river, the Cog Hill River, and portions of the hatchery subdistrict may be open to keep up with Cog Hill Lake sockeye salmon run entry if warranted. And finally, shifting to Coho salmon, there is a decent chance that the Coho salmon run will be small again this year, similar to 2023 and 2024. Conservative management is expected in the Copper and Bering River District fisheries until the run strength can be reasonably evaluated. This translates to a single 24-hour period per week to start until run entry indices, harvest, and aerial surveys warrant more or less fishing opportunity. In the Cog Hill District, Coho salmon fishery runs have been highly variable in recent years, and the fishing schedule will be progressively adapted based on harvest patterns. That's all I've got.
Okay. Who wants to go first? Questions for Jeremy? Comments? Okay, well, I've got a question for you, Jeremy. Do you anticipate any modifications to the boundary lines out on the flats, in the closure areas and things like that? I saw in an announcement something about little soft tuck.
So, little soft tuck has been part of the equation for the last number of years. The expanded Chinook salmon closure line does go through along the beach in front of little soft tuck. So that wouldn't be a change.
So you don't anticipate any changes for this year from last year, let's say?
Not for a standard approach, but
Okay.
it depends on what we see
Sure.
for salmon abundance, and we'll adapt from there.
Right. And I had a question about the regulation, dictating our opening date no earlier than the 22nd. And is there any way, let's say the sonar goes crazy starting tomorrow or whenever you get it fired up, is there any way to work around that regulation? Like call the governor or something like that? Just curious.
Yeah, I mean, the Board of Fisheries took action to move the first possible start date of the fishery to the 22nd of July, and so I don't have veto authority
Yeah,
to.
I didn't think so. Okay.
Sorry, I meant May.
Yeah.
Getting ahead of myself.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, that's all I have for you. Any, Zeke, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess, could you expand a little bit on how you're gonna be evaluating the king salmon run strength in the early season? As what harvest numbers you're looking for? On those lines.
Sure, it would be similar to recent years. Well, one big change will be that shift in the start date. So we'll have a little bit of a gray area there. We'll have some historical harvest data that'll kind of give us an indication of what, that potentially what the foregone harvest was in that first week, potentially, because that'll be part of the equation for evaluating, how much fishing effort. That Chinook run can sustain sonar. We'll be looking at the apportionment of the sonar. We've got 7 years worth of apportionment data at the sonar, so we'll be able to compare this year's run and how it's trending relative to those past years. And so once we start the fishery, we'll look at harvest indices and compare those to what that looks like relative to historical harvest for that, the stat week around the 22nd. That'd be about most of what we've got.
So, are you gonna be publishing that apportionment data from the king salmon counts of the sonar?
That we're still discussing that, so I couldn't really answer yay or nay on that one. I know that we were talking about it last year. As far as, doing it in season relatively, close to real time. Yeah, that's something that we'll be hashing out here for the season.
I guess I would encourage you to give as much information in the announcements as possible. If you're expanding closures or not taking an opener based on one of those things you just laid out that will tell you your king salmon run size, whether it's harvest level, sonar escapement, or what have you. Any more information put in the announcement really helps the fleet understand why we're in the situation that we are.
Sure. Yeah, be happy to do that.
Go ahead, Darren.
Yeah, Thanks, Jeremy. What is the anticipated king harvest for the third opener with this run prediction? You have that hard number or?
No, I
range,
do
I
not
should
have
say.
that hard number. Just trying to think back to the Board of Fish, we had those tables up. You're starting to get into that, typically that 2,000 to 3,000 range, because that's right up, coming up on the peak of the Chinook salmon run. But I can get back to you on with more specifics on that.
Okay, and I guess in theory, if we catch, twice as much of that, or if it's showing more strength than the anticipated number and your sonar counts look good, you feeling a little better, or are you gonna still be extra cautious?
Yeah, if we harvest more Chinook salmon in a short period of time, that's going to be an indication of abundance, of higher abundance relative to, the historical average for what that's worth. I mean, a lot of it depends on how much, fishing time, we're, we're announcing for to also keep up with the sockeye run. I would say that, if you look at, well, I guess that would be a scenario with a larger king salmon run, more like 22 and 23. I think that there's a decent chance we could stick with a similar fishing schedule. With a larger sockeye run, that we would want to expand fishing time, so that would have to be a consideration for how much additional harvest potential you have on Chinook salmon in that scenario. But the forecast is for a small Chinook run and a large sockeye run, and that's just, the start of the season. We'll see what it actually looks like once we get into it. But under that scenario, we're looking at a very challenging management scenario in that case. Because if you look at the last 3 years where we missed the Chinook salmon escapement goal, 24, 21, and 20, those were years where we fished a very conservative fishing schedule, short periods, and we took time off. And all 3 of those years, at least 2 periods through, the first 3 weeks of the fishery, if not more. So I'd just finish by saying that that's a very conservative approach, and we still miss the escapement goals in those years on smaller sockeye runs than what are forecasted this year.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Going back to missing the 2024 escapement goals. So you mentioned 7 years of Aris sonar data. Do you foresee a time in the future when you will be comfortable using that as a primary or a standalone data? I know like last year, NV had equipment issues. And so there was a pretty big discrepancy between the escapement that Fish and Game had versus NV had. Do you foresee a time when, if again, they have equipment issues and so your data is probably maybe the less skewed data? Is there a time where you could see yourself using that Aris sonar as a primary tool?
Right. In the context of this season or future seasons?
Sure, this season, but just in the future. At what point will you have enough years of data that you're comfortable with because last year NV numbers, there was issues with the equipment, right? But that still is what was used to primarily come up with the escapement, correct?
Correct. Yeah, that is the method that is used to, calculate the escapement.
I could.
Go ahead, Darren.
Let me follow up. So when do you think you're going to be able to use that sonar to?
Well, the department's
That data.
working towards, potentially, progressively, the more seasons of data that we have, the more contrast we have and comparatives to, what this current season, what our apportionment numbers look like relative to other years with, or very, with small runs, large runs. So we progressively have, a tool that's getting better and better. And, we're working towards, potentially having something in for the next board cycle. There's been quite a bit of discussion about that, about having potentially a Chinook salmon, escape and goal recommendation that would be potentially tied into that.
Right. Go ahead, Darren.
Yeah, I had been kind of on the topic of king salmon. I was gonna save it for the discussion portion of this, but since we're here, what was the 2024 final escapement number for king salmon?
I don't have that in front of me, but I can get that for you pretty quickly.
It was
It was just under 20.
so marginally close. And so just kind of reflecting back to Trey's point of when using the Aris sonar for management in the future potentially, and you have multiple data sets from the fleet, in-river fisheries, marker capture, and the Aris sonar, and some of the numbers may be conflicting, like last season particularly. How come it wasn't, I guess the in-river number wasn't changed, since the more conservative number was 30,000 and then NVs was somewhere below 20. I guess that's a concern I have just using one data set, right? So you want to use a range of data sets to come together with an accurate representation of what the escapement was. So I guess question to the department is, why wasn't the number for the escapement over Kings updated when the Aris sonar counted 30,000 fish?
Well, I'd step back a little bit on that. I'd say, over the last 7 seasons, we've seen quite a bit of variability between both methodologies, the marker capture and the apportionment at the sonar, and they've gone both directions. Some years where the sonar's apportionment's higher, and some years where the marker capture is higher, and we're still kind of looking at those two data sets and trying to understand really how they compare. But our standard is the marker capture, so that's kind of how you end up with the escape and goal estimate that we have for this season. Is that's the standard currently.
So
And I think Jenny had something to add.
Yep.
Yeah, I wanted to jump into Trey's point. Yeah, thanks for that question. So what we're doing right now is we're doing a biometric review of the comparisons of the Aris sonar data set to the fish wheel data set. And so part of that biometric review, is the considerations of the different size classes that we're assessing between those two. And really, this biometric review is what we want to complete before we're looking to move towards an escapement goal that would be based on the Aris sonar. And so we're looking at things such as, how these two compare, the different size classes that each are enumerating. And that's kind of the big step that we want to complete before we would move to an escapement goal based on the Aris data, is a thorough biometric review of it, which is currently ongoing.
Do you have a timeline on that at all, or?
Ideally, I think we're looking at completing that, over the course of this next winter.
Thank you.
Hey, Jenny, for the record, can you state your name and
Yeah.
title?
Jenny Marella, Area Research Biologist, Commercial Fisheries. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Okay, go ahead, John.
I have 2 questions that are separate. The first one is, so given we're starting the fisheries a week later than we did before, are you comparing statistical week 27 to statistical week 27, or are you comparing the start of the fishery to the start of the fishery, assuming maybe there'd be some buildup with the foregone first week of fishing? How much are you gonna weight statistical week versus first opener when you're trying to analyze the beginning of the run?
Well, we'll take the statistical week that kind of brackets the first opener, and that'll be what we'll be looking at for comparison. And then the previous statistical week that would have encompassed the a potential opener the two potential openers prior that we, the week that we delayed the fishery, we would have that as kind of an assumption for what the, potential foregone harvest, was what might be in the river.
Well, but you wouldn't assume those fish all entered, would you? Or would you? The fish that would have been harvest, you would assume entered the river and it's the same as the second week of fishing?
It's possible.
But I'm asking what your assumptions would be, not,
It depends on the conditions,
right?
right? I mean, is it a spring like the last couple of years where we've got late ice out, cold river water? Fish seem to be kind of holding offshore,
Right.
late entry into the river, or is it a spring where we've got indications of fish moving across the bar pretty readily and into the river, and we've got counts at the sonar early? Yeah, so all that's going to have to factor into kind of an evaluation of what that potential is.
So there's no assumptions, I guess, is what you're getting at. It's gonna be fluid based on river conditions and sonar numbers.
Yeah, it'll be fluid, but grounded in historical, data. Just as far as what the potential harvest would have been, potentially, escapement for some earlier timed, like an earlier time run entry pattern into the river.
Okay. Second question, is it all right if I go to the second?
Sure.
Okay. So 24,200 is the reg, AAC 24,200 is the crazy reg that pools our ANS with commercial and subsistence and clearly outlines the intention that with less commercial opportunity, there should be more subsistence opportunity. We just had a reduction in our commercial opportunity and we had a reduction in our subsistence opportunity, and that's not how that regulation is supposed to work. Can you talk us through the department's thinking in coming to that conclusion?
So, yeah, the department followed Board of Fisheries guidance from this last meeting. I'm assuming that's what you're referring to, is the reduction in subsistence harvest opportunity in that first week of the fishery?
The board only changed the commercial opener. They didn't change anything with the subsistence opener. The subsistence should open May 15th and be open until 48 hours from the start of the commercial fishery by statute.
So the board is on the record indicating that for the fishery to be managed for no more than one subsistence fishing period in that first week.
But the board didn't change the regulations.
I'm not disagreeing with you on that, but
Okay.
the board is on the record.
So the board is doing the emergency
Right.
announcements like that's,
And the department's on the record at the meeting as well.
so they're directing emergency announcements at the Board of Fish meetings. Is that normal?
It's well within the department's EO authority to follow that recommendation from the board.
Okay.
So
Thanks, Jeremy. John, thanks. Anybody else have questions for Jeremy on the data?
I just have a quick one
Go ahead,
about,
Zeke.
jump over to the sound and East Chamois Weir, Cog Hill Weir, both those programs running again this year.
correct.
And then diverting from the fishing schedule, I know last year we did I can't remember what day of the week opener, but I mean, I think that was the right thing to do, but I guess I'd be interested to hear from processor members, or if you're considering doing a diverting from a Monday, Thursday schedule on the copper if we have large escapement event or something like that.
I would say, should the situation present itself, yeah, absolutely. If there's an opportunity, if we had an extended closure, or if we had a situation where we fished, anyway, we've been fishing on a regular schedule, harvest, abundance indices are high, and we're also seeing that in the river, and it looks like we should throw more time out at the commercial fishery. We could definitely go off schedule in those kind of scenarios.
Anybody else? Looks like that's it. Thanks, Jeremy. Appreciate it.
Sure.
All right, next up, seine management. Heather.
Hi, everyone. Heather Scannell, Prince William Sound Area Management Biologist for Purse Seine. Mine's gonna be pretty short and sweet as usual. The 2025 pink salmon total run forecast for the Sound is 66.7 million fish. That includes 18.63 million wild stock, 20 million VFDA fish, and 28 million piswak fish. Managing for wild stock escapement, midpoint 1.84 million fish, and preseason assumptions from VFDA and piswak is that they will need approximately 18% of their projected returns for brood stock and cost recovery. That leaves us with 56.1 million fish for harvest. Similar to the last previous years, we'll start doing the aerial surveys in late June, looking at wild chum. Past few seasons, Eastern District wild pinks have been coming on pretty strong, depending on if they start coming in as forecasted, and VFDA cost recovery seems to be performing well. You know, we could be looking at some early season opportunity in the Eastern District. Maybe July 7th through the 10th has been what the recent years. Also depending on that VFDA return and wild stocks, you know, we could maybe hopefully get on an early season schedule of 12s or 14s. I tend to like 12-hour periods. I'm more comfortable giving more area on wild stocks with the 12-hour period. If it's strong hatchery returns and we're fishing hatchery sub-districts, and I'd be more than willing to go to 14-hour periods. Moving into August, you know, things get a little trickier. All the wild stocks start coming online. We'll be trying to move piswak fish to their facilities for their cost recovery. Try to figure out a schedule if the wild stock forecast and piswak come in as forecasted, a schedule that accommodates both common property and cost recovery. Try to knock that out. Get that done in an orderly manner. Moving on to chum. Same fleet only has AFK this year. It's a forecast of 210,000 fish. So we'll start on June 2nd, do the standard 3 periods a week until sockeye harvest tells us otherwise, and then we will react accordingly with either time or area. That's all I got. Take any
Right.
questions?
Yeah, any questions for Heather?
Better ask you something. I guess I was just curious about, I know last year towards the end of August, there was like a landslide in Fidalgo up there in the Sunny River.
Yes, that did start to clear. So by the time I was done with the aerial survey there were fish above it.
Okay, go ahead, Trey.
Board of Fish kind of out of the blue, they seemed like there was concern from them about the wild chum stocks. Do you have any plans to do more aerial surveys or?
I don't know how many more I could do.
Yeah,
I mean, it's difficult to assess chum and
right.
so, yeah.
So no.
I'll add a 0 here and there. Just-
Yeah. Perfect.
I guess my last question was, I think it was 2 years ago, we had a pretty strong Montague District wild pinks run kind of early, and we kind of got pigeonholed because the Port Chalmers sub-district can't open for seining until August 1st. If I remember.
June 30th,
June
I
30th.
believe, is when the regulation is
June.
defines.
Yeah. July 30th.
July 30th, sorry, thank
Yeah.
you.
And remind me, that's a regulation that you can't use EO authority over.
Well, I can open the Montague district, I just can't open the Port Chalmers sub-district.
Okay. Even if,
So the same fleet would be, you know, fishing the southern end. It would be,
yeah, I know in past years, the Port Chalmers sub-district is gigantic relative to where the fishery really takes place. And there was a lot of forgone opportunity on pink salmon in that zone. I guess what comes to mind is also the concern about degrading chum salmon once the gillnet fleet stop fishing Port Chalmers, which seems to happen before that July 30th date pretty often. I don't know if there's a way that the department can use that as a reason to allow the purse seine into that zone earlier, but something.
I believe we have that management authority specific to the Cog Hill district. I do not think I have it for Port Chalmers. I
Thanks.
think it's, yeah, specific to degrading quality in like the Esther sub-district. I believe the same fleet could go in early.
Okay.
I will look into it, but I'm pretty sure I've looked into that quite a bit based on conversations similar to this.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Zeke. Anybody else? All right, thanks, Heather. Appreciate it. All right, next in the hot seat, BISWAC, Jeff Clark.
All right, thank you. Jeff Clark, General Manager, Prince William Sound Aquaculture. I'll start with assessing and reviewing our brood numbers each year has been a part of our success in achieving the egg take goals for both the Sound, Pink, and Chum hatcheries for the last 4 years. And those brood requirements are evaluated on female percentages and fecundity, along with sea lion predation that we're seeing at AFK, Wally, and Nuremberg and Cannery Creek. And this year, during that review, there were no substantive changes planned for the numbers of brood needed for 2025 from the previous odd years in 2023. So same numbers we'll be looking to put in front of the hatcheries for the egg takes for the Chum and Pink programs. Jump into Main Bay. Folks fishing there will notice the regulation change that was made during Board of Fish this year that moved the cork line 200 feet off the barrier seine for sport fish and prohibits all fishing inside when the barrier seine is in place. Additionally, we brought in a net mender this year to go through the Main Bay seine in advance of the season. And the repairs were extensive, modeled throughout the seine, and the cost to repair that was about twice the original estimate. So hopefully that that new regulation will put a stop to that. Uh, 2025 return forecast. So PISWAC is forecasting a midpoint return of 28 million pink salmon, 2.44 million chum salmon, and that's for all 3 locations, AFK, Port Chalmers, and Wally Nuremberg. A million sockeye at Main Bay, just under 217,000 Gulcana sockeye, and 9,000 coho. We'll provide regular in-season announcements to the fleet detailing the revenue goals and the cost recovery efforts, both at the website and on the Facebook page. And the PISWAC hotline, the call-in number will continue as well. That's it.
Okay, thanks.
Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, I have a quick question on that. What kind of, that brood year, was that 2020? For this year's return?
Yes, primarily 2020, correct.
All right, any questions for Jeff?
Yeah, I got 2. One would be relating to Main Bay, and do you foresee that regulation change helping resolve some IHN problems there potentially from snagging a fish?
I wouldn't have any way to assess that or evaluate that for the IHN, yeah.
Is it something that we can keep an eye on and see if it decreases and maybe make a correlation?
We'll definitely be following, incidents of IHN and we also can keep track of number of fish that we're calling as well.
And relating to the coho, did you say 9,000 was the
forecast?
And what, I guess, the parent year for that, was it sea lions being an issue for egg take, or what was
A couple of things. As I think it was Jeremy pointed out, we're seeing some downtrends in the returns in the coho specifically. Also, we just get so little evaluation on that. The only evaluation we're really getting at the moment is what we see returning on site. So we don't have good numbers to make a really educated forecast on.
And you don't have a way to enumerate sport harvest throughout the sound with otoliths or anything like that? Or I felt like we might have had a 1 year of data with that. I can't recall.
There's been efforts to try to get more evaluation, but it's really hard to single out the coho evaluation in any of those fisheries in the midst of, you know, the massive pink numbers.
Thank you, Jeff.
Any other questions for Jeff? All right, thanks a lot, Jeff. Appreciate it. Next up, Mike Wells, VFDA.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike Wells, Executive Director, Valdez Fisheries Development. We've provided a preseason report in the packet, and we'll have that posted online here either later today or tomorrow. I'd like to start out, just talk a little bit about the 2024 fry releases, kind of builds to the next stage, which is return forecast. Fry went out last year. They did really well. A little mortality. We didn't see any whale presence up in Port Valdez. We released approximately 251 million brood year 23 pink fry in 2 stages. First group went out May 3rd through the 11th, and then we released the second group on the 23rd, 24th of May. Normal date range for our release timing. Average weight was good. First group achieved target weight of 0.49 grams, which is above our desired target weight of 0.40. And that's in line with our 10-year average at 0.49. Second release, which is our later, bigger release, went out at 0.86 grams. It was again above our target weight of 0.80 and just a little bit shy of our 10-year average of 0.88 grams. And in addition, we released 1.9 million brood year 22 coho smolt. Those went out at an average of 20.1 grams, and we have target weight on those of between 18 and 20 grams. So nice fish went out. The return 2025 return forecast, mid-range pink return this year is estimated to be 20 million. That's based on the 10-year odd year average return over the last 10-year period has averaged 18.1 million. The last 2 odd year returns have averaged 21.1 million. So within a line of that historic. Let's see, the 25 estimated return is based on an average marine survival of 7.97, which is the average of the last 10 odd years. Coho return is forecasted to be right at 57,000, and it's based on just an overall 10-year average of 0.307. So mid-range forecast at 20 million. Low end of the scale would be at 10 million, high end at 30 million pinks. And again, 57,000 coho to Solomon Gulch, expecting just under 600 to Titlic as a return to that 20,000 coho smolt that we put down there for subsistence. The board has set a preseason pink salmon revenue goal of 4.8 million. We're going to require 408,000 pink salmon for brood stock based on a 50-50 male-female ratio. And cost recovery test fishing will begin somewhere around the 25th of June. Looking at this year's 2025 out migration, we were only able to achieve about 71% of our 270 million green egg take goal for last year, brood year 24. It's unfortunately a shortfall of about 75 million pink salmon eggs. Coho was challenging as well. We only achieved 93% of our permitted 2 million egg goal, about 1.83 million eggs. And last year's fishery was so poor that it actually resulted in what I believe is the first time in the history of the VFDA sport fish program that we actually had to close sport fishing down within the Valdez THA. Our sea lion predation problem up at VFDA last year up Solomon Gulch was pretty unprecedented. I think overall just lack of good ocean productivity for coho and South Central as a whole also contributed to low return numbers there. Egg take, as far as timing went well, it was a little bit late due to fish ripeness. We started our egg take on August 5th and finished on August 30th. Average pink percentage, or yeah, pink salmon, female percentage was only at about 35%, so very low female percentage on pinks. And we used approximately 369,000 fish for egg take and no surplus. Good incubation temperatures over the winter, a little bit on the cool side. So out-migration this year started on April 3rd and was completed on April 16th. We'll have final numbers after release. We're going to start releasing probably first batch around the 12th. And it looks like we'll have about 183 million pinks that'll go out this year. We also expect to pond approximately 1.9 million brood year 23 coho. So a couple of capital projects. We had a slide up in the Solomon Creek Canyon last year that took out our Falls Creek line, we call it. What that does is that allows us to bring ambient water temperature into the hatchery during the winter and cool our incubation temperatures. Slows down fish growth. We were able to get Harris Sand and Gravel to go in and start that project after the dam finished spilling for the year on the 15th of October. They wrapped it up just before Thanksgiving. Good news is that for that section of the line, we were able to put in a permanent fix. So for about 65% of that line, it's good to go now for the foreseeable future. One of the other projects that we're working on right now, which I think we're very excited about, hopeful it'll help us with broodstock recruitment and retention up the hatchery. We are excavating our brood pond. That was constructed originally back in the 80s. It's going to provide us with about a little over a half acre of water at a -2.3 minus. And Solomon Creek will run into that and keep it oxygenated and fed. So we're hoping with that, we'll be able to cut down on some of the dead loss around the hatchery around the weir there. And also be able to bring fish in that early component and get them to come in and lock in on the system there. So that'll help with broodstock management. So about $500,000 worth of earthwork, and we're expected to be done with that about 31st of May. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Go ahead, Darren.
I guess it's more pertaining to the sea line issue, maybe at Piswak and BFDA. Are you guys, with this new raceway, are you putting some sort of deterrent or bars or anything to prevent them from laying in there?
Yeah, we are working with National Marine Fisheries Service. I think actually reading the minutes, I think you mentioned this last year. National Marine Fisheries Service is using the same type of proof concept for the Columbia. I'm actually going to make a trip down later this month to look at that system at the Bonneville and Willamette Falls. But that's kind of what we're looking at. Want to make sure that NIMS is in agreement with that. They're pretty particular about what you install. Certainly, we want to be able to hold them back out of the raceway and off the weir without it being considered a take or an influence on their ability to feed. We needed to get this brood pond done first. If we can get all our ducks in a row and get it funded, we'll probably look at doing something by next season.
Glad to hear that.
Any more questions for Greg? Or Mike, sorry, Greg. Greg. No? Okay. Thank you, Mike. All right, next item up, discussion item A, king salmon management. You want to kick that off?
Yeah.
Darren?
I'll lead it off, I guess, collecting my thoughts here. I have one question for the department, one for NVE, but I'll lead with the department. Why wasn't the king salmon escapement number updated when you had conflicting escapements between market capture and the ARIS? Just because the biometric review is not done?
Yeah, so currently the escapement goal is based on that sonar mark recapture. That's the assessment that we use of whether we met the goal or not. That may change in the future, but at this time, that's what it's based on. And that's what was presented to the board when that goal was set as well.
Will the department have the authority or the ability to retroactively change the escapement goal after this biometric review is done?
My understanding is that the escapement goal remains what it was at the time. For example, if we change an escapement goal in the future, whether it was met or missed is still based on what was observed that year, is my understanding.
Thank you. And I got a question for John here. Do you guys have any contingency plans? If your fish wheels break down, you have parts in town, parts on site, or as you can see, we're kind of in a lot's riding on this assessment tool.
Yeah, so like anything you do out in the middle of nowhere, there's backup plans for your backup plans. We run the fish camps with redundancy, running 2 wheels when we only really need 1, all season long. So, yeah, I mean, there's backup plans, but sometimes all the plans don't come together. And when you're doing work in the middle of the river, in the middle of nowhere, it just takes time to get resources there. So, like the not stated question is, do we think there's going to be another situation like last year where all of a sudden one of our camps goes down because we lose 2 wheels at once? And no, the gear that broke down wasn't like bubble gum back together. We rebuilt all the stuff that was broken down. And like every year we'll bring welders and crews up to our camps to get all our gear tuned up before the season. And really the best we can do is fish 2 big wheels on that river, and the river is the boss of everything. It's sometimes it takes everything from you. And that's a big part of why we favor a sonar apportionment. The one other thing I'll say that you're not asking me, you're asking Fish and Game, but we're not counting the exact same thing at the fish wheels. And that you're never going to have exact alignment because the fish wheels are marking king salmon over 500 millimeters. And the large fish apportionment is a different group of fish. The size cutoffs are different. And we'll get to where those right size cutoffs are, but that's more of where the overlap is between big sockeye and small kings. So to expect those 2 numbers to be perfectly aligned at any point, even if they're both perfect, isn't probably realistic.
Yeah, I understand how both those numbers work, and you're assessing more kings because you have a smaller number. You do the millimeter fork length. Their number is more conservative. It is a larger goal number essentially. So their number was higher last season than NVE's, and that's what I'm trying to get the distinction here
But
about.
there's not a species apportionment there. They're potentially counting big sockeye as large fish.
I just disagree with you there. Depending on what their fork length is, being basically a 5-year-old king salmon. So it just isn't true.
You're asking me if something's true?
No, I said that's just not true. They're not assessing red salmon in the river because they are making it such a conservative number from the fork length. Your assessment or MVE's assessment is a less conservative number, but you get to handle the fish and see it.
So we know are only counting king salmon. So we know that.
Yes, and that's I guess. Well, sorry. Can the department tell me exactly what the air sonar fork length is?
Yeah, so it's 772 millimeters, which is equivalent to 750.
Which would be about
Millimeter
a
fork length.
15, 14-pound king. I don't think I've ever caught a sockeye that size, so. All right.
That's all you got?
Contingency plans.
So we're on the king salmon management discussion. Zeke, you got anything?
Well, I think it would be great if Jeremy wanted to use this moment to expand a little bit more on what he's thinking about as far as step-wide approaches for king salmon management. I think that's why everybody's here.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so stepwise, I think we're based on recent years of smaller returns, just lower Chinook salmon production. We're already starting out pretty conservatively this year. We're fishing the first period's at 12 hours expanded inside closure. So that's already a pretty significant conservation measure in itself. We're starting the fishery a week later. So there's another factor to consider for conservation. So we'll kind of get out there and see what we harvest with that first 12. And we'll have the, our abundance indices in the district, kind of distribution and just harvest levels. And, as we talked about earlier, apportionment at the sonar. A little later in the season, potentially some kind of tracking daily capture rates at the wheels and the kind of running a market capture estimate in season, which really doesn't come together until really late. So that's kind of something that's really not all that relevant early in the season. But stepwise, I would think if a lot of it depends on what our sockeye run ends up looking like. Is 2 12-hour periods a week, is that going to be enough to keep up with sockeye salmon run entry into the river? Or are we going to risk having sockeye salmon passage at the sonar that's above our, the upper end of our targets? And if that's the case, then I think, a step we could take would be to try to fish around the tides a little bit. That's something I've discussed with a number of folks in town, and there's, I think the potential second, third period of this season definitely kind of fit those parameters where you would, potentially you could delay the start of the fishery and fish into the, kind of get past low water slack and fish into the flood to start the period as opposed to starting near low water on some large tides. And, so that's under a scenario where we've got a lot of sockeye and a Chinook salmon run that we're concerned about potentially not meeting the escapement objectives on. And if it looks like we have a sockeye run that's going to require extended fishing period to keep up with, to keep that escapement the passage in river within our targets, we could definitely be looking at some area adjustments to try to focus more effort on sockeye and while reducing the harvest potential on Chinook salmon. I don't, a time strategy, I mean, they're kind of working inversely there. I mean, the more time you need to keep up with the sockeye run, and if you have a small Chinook run, then you kind of need to come up with some area management strategies to reduce your king salmon harvest potential. So I think that's kind of the progression. So hopefully and I could see a scenario where it would kind of be a hybrid too. I've talked about this with a number of folks where we're still fishing, something similar to what we have the last number of seasons with just a 12 potentially expanded Chinook salmon closure to start a fishing period and then having expanded time with a reduced area to focus on sockeye.
Thanks for that's being transparent there. Reduced area, in the past, you've done Egg Island. Are you cutting Egg Island out of the system? That's probably I'm assuming you're talking about that or larger, yeah.
Yeah, that's one tool in a stepwise approach. It just depends to what degree, on how long of periods we're looking at to keep up with that sockeye salmon run entry. It could be more than that. It could be fishing offshore.
Thanks. Yeah.
Any questions or additions to this discussion? Good.
Well, I guess I'd have one more
Yeah,
question.
jump in there.
Just I'm filling for
Move.
NV over here, but if you close off Egg Island, would you keep that closed for like a Saturday subsistence opener? Or if you did an offshore, if you did expanded your closure area to all the way offshore?
So there is precedent when we utilized that Egg Island area, I think in 2017, we kept the subsistence fishery open in that area while closing the commercial. I would expect to maintain a similar precedent for any subsistence opportunity where we would, we would maintain that area. And on the west end of the district, that is a traditional area for subsistence.
Thanks.
Okay, any more comments on that?
Guess I'll just get it on the record with the moving the opener back one full week. Over, I think it was the 10-year average, we've given up 38% of our king harvest. So I think that's just important to emphasize. This fleet's already doing a large part to ensure king salmon escapement. So,
Yeah, thanks, Darren. Okay, next item on the agenda is take a look and review spring 2024 adopted recommendations from this meeting last year. That's on page 15 of your packet. And just kind of have a discussion about those recommendations and what effect they had on the fishery. Do you have any comments? You want to start out on this? You got any comments on any of this, Zeke? So the first one was for the processors to provide pink weights to ADF&G. Heather, did you have access to that data? Was it helpful to you or?
We did. A lot of the harvest was like cost recovery harvest because we didn't have
Okay.
much opportunity
Right,
last year.
right.
So it probably wasn't the best season to roll out
Yeah, right.
something like that. But this next season certainly could be more beneficial to us.
Right. Okay, thanks. Next one was to operate the subsistence fishery in East Chamois with the same area as the most recent commercial fishery. Did that happen, Jeremy?
No, we continued with the historical precedent
Okay,
in that fishery. So,
all right.
yeah.
And will that be a consideration to take up this year? Possibly, just depending on run size and cost recovery and things like that?
Yeah, it would be a consideration. But we have not used DO authority to restrict the subsistence fishery.
In East Chamois.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Zeke.
I guess, hopefully maybe Jeff can chime in a little bit on the changes with the Board of Fish meeting this last winter. I believe now there is the ability to restrict the subsistence fishery. Am I correct? We changed yeah. Okay. I mean, I understand that there was some clarification that if PISWAC is were to ask the department to close that subsistence fishery to allow for cost recovery to take place, that you would consider that request. Is that correct?
I recall the discussions, but I'm trying to think back to what the board actually passed. And I don't recall them passing anything specific to subsistence.
Okay, maybe I'm mixing up my Board of Fish proposals. Thanks.
Yeah, I don't remember that either.
You recall?
Okay, next item on that list is to open the Copper River inside Chinook closure area to subsistence unless non-subsistence fisheries have already been restricted first. Sort of a moot point. I don't think we ever got any.
We did the
inside.
opposite.
We did the opposite, so. Next one, limit time and area in Chalmers to allow passage of ester chum for cost recovery and broodstock. Was that happen?
Yes, we started out, they were pretty much neck down
Right,
into their box the entire season.
yeah. Yeah, well, and that was another failure, so, okay, moving on.
Eated everyone.
Yeah. ADF&G to explore taking a female percentage when doing odorless samples to help separate run timing of wild versus hatchery stock.
Yeah, that's something that we could theoretically do, but the bottom line there is right now our otolith samplers operate, as a crew of one, and that would take 2 technicians instead of 1. So that would essentially be twice as much.
Gotcha.
If that's something there, right now, a lot of our otolith program is funded through a cooperative agreement with PISWAC. If that was valuable data in the future, we could collect that, but it would require more funding that the department does not currently have for that.
Okay. So no, and put funding on there. Okay, so that completes our list from last year. Next item up is new recommendations for this year. Starting with Gilnet and let's see, CDFU's got one, so I'll let the CDFU rep rattle that off.
All right, CDFU Gilnet, or CDFU recommends Aristonar for in-season management assessment along with the fleet's catch and NVA mark recapture. So
Okay. So
kind of hammered this out a little bit already, I think, but
right, yeah, we beat on this one for a little while, and we kind of have the answer from ADF&G on that, so let's move on to number 2.
recommend consistent main bay openers to reduce quality degradation of sockeye salmon.
And
I think Jeremy said that he was going to manage for that as is, so.
That's correct.
okay,
And
go ahead, number 3.
then recommend flying more frequently. Coho index streams expand opportunities weather permits. And if I don't recall from Jeremy's discussion, he said he was going to do that as well. Possible.
Yeah, well,
Weather dependent.
yeah, it's going to be just like it has been.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll try to fly as often as we can.
All right, so for the record, we've got the last, you got any other? Sorry, I see a number 4 there. Anything else?
No other from me.
Okay. All right, so as a a board or committee, we need to take action to approve these recommendations. As a whole, does anybody have any objections to approving these for the record? No objections, so hearing no objection, those are all approved recommendations. Next set of recommendations from the SETNet folks. And I didn't see a SETNet guy here, so we'll let Zeke rattle these off. Go ahead,
All
Zeke.
right, I know a lot about set, I think, yeah, Forrest isn't here, but yeah, recommend early Coghill Lagoon opener to reduce over escapement risk. I think Gillette had one pretty similar to this. And then recommend at least 2 24-hour periods a week in the East Chamois district to allow for continued opportunity during cost recovery. I know there was a lot of concern about large cost recovery goals at Main Bay leading to fish degradation. I mean, I think last year it went amazingly well. Had some really good cost recovery numbers, and I think it speaks to the boats doing the cost recovery and just a good team all along there. So hopefully that can continue. And then recommend continued support for NV in their efforts to operate the East Chamois Weir. That's it.
Okay. Yeah, and those, so I guess, any comments, Jeremy, on that number 1 about early Coghill opener to reduce over escapement, just up in the lagoon?
Yeah, so typically I guess the schedule in recent years, I should say, has been those extended periods north of the pass, Esther Pass. And then as escapement starts to come online and it looks like it's trending strong, and then we expand into the mouth of the river.
Yeah, and that's pretty early. It seemed like last year was pretty darn early, I thought.
It's early, but there are definitely some examples historically of getting, by the time we get that out there, we get that opener scheduled, we can have a pretty good slug of fish in the river. So Darren came and talked to me about this, and I think definitely be looking at trying to open that a bit earlier to try to get ahead of that. And if it, if that run doesn't come in as strong as we anticipate, we can always dial that back. The effort up there is usually pretty limited.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Go ahead, Jake.
I'm just piggybacking on that, like especially next year with having Chalmers. I mean, I like to fish Cog Hill, but on a year where Chalmers is open 7 days a week, I'm probably going to Chalmers on the closure, not Cog Hill River. So I could see like next year, the effort being pretty down there, and just seems like getting an early start and then cutting it off if you need to makes a lot of sense to me.
Thank you. Darren, go ahead.
Yeah, just a follow up with Trey's point, also with the pink prediction looking fairly healthy this season. I think that be harder to have more people up there harvesting sockeye specifically too, without having to weed through all the pink salmon. So you're likely to get continued escapement of sockeye throughout that run.
All right, thanks, Darren. Let's see. Any other comments on any of this list? So same for the set net list. We need to approve this list. And is there any objection to approving these as recommendations to the department? No objection, they are approved. All right, next item up, we've got a presentation by Reed Johnson from CFEC concerning an optimum permit study for gillnet and seine permits in our district. And see Reed out there. So come on up, Reed. You can grab a seat over here with a mic if you want.
That's it. Great. Thank you.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
And you've got a presentation for the,
No, I don't.
Green or
It's
just-
just a
okay.
quick 5-minute
perfect,
spiel
perfect.
here. So good afternoon. My name is Reed Johnson. I am with the Commercial Fisheries Entry Commission. I am the chief researcher for that organization. CFEC was formed after the passage of the Limited Entry Act in the 1970s. This Entry Act was passed by the Alaska legislature because of increasing participation in salmon fisheries around Alaska that put both salmon stocks and the economic livelihood of permit holders at risk. CFEC is tasked with limiting fisheries when necessary, administering permits, and adjusting permit numbers in fisheries through optimum number studies when needed. Which is why I am here today. After the last Board of Fish meeting for Prince William Sound, CFEC received a petition to conduct an optimum numbers study for the Prince William Sound drift gillnet fishery. At that meeting, there were proposals to allow dual and stacked permit operations in Prince William Sound, either allowing one person to fish 2 permits on a single vessel or 2 permit holders to fish aboard a single vessel. Both situations would have allowed for an additional complement of gear to be fished by one vessel. These proposals did not pass. CFEC regards both permit stacking and dual permit regulations to be methods by which the number of vessels or the number of participants in a fishery could be reduced. Both scenarios would ultimately cause net earnings for individuals to increase. Either one individual would reap the benefits of additional gear, or 2 individuals would split the cost of participation aboard one vessel. Another method of participation reduction, which gained some traction after the meeting, is to petition CFEC to conduct an optimum numbers study. Now, an optimum numbers study examines both economic and management optimum numbers. The economic portion of the study is what I'm here to talk about today. We take a look at what participants are earning in a fishery, that is gross earnings minus cost, and compare it to the economic opportunities in the surrounding areas, which in other words is the median household income in the surrounding areas, which in this case is the Chugach census area encompassing Prince William Sound. The central premise of the study is that if there are more participants in a fishery, they will each get a smaller proportion of the harvest and make less money, and vice versa. The economic optimum number is the number of permits for which most participants can reasonably expect to make an income equal to or greater than the median income in the surrounding areas, especially when accounting for the time invested in the fishery. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, the median income for the Chugach census area is about $90,000 a year. This does not mean that permit holders should be guaranteed to make $90,000 a year in net earnings. In some years, individuals will make more or less in other years, depending on individual fortune while fishing. It does mean that every individual should statistically have a reasonable opportunity to make income comparable to the median income when adjusted for the time spent invested in the fishery. In other words, in most years, people should be able to make around $90,000 if they were to fish full time. And again, this is net earnings, so it's gross earnings minus costs. Another point that I really have to stress is that this is adjusted for the time spent in the fishery. So if somebody is spending 6 months of their year working in this fishery, preparing for the fishery, and also fishing in the fishery, then what we're looking to see is that people are making half of $90,000, so $45,000. And again, that's net, so minus costs. CFEC has very good data available regarding what permit holders gross. Every fish ticket in the state of Alaska is sent to CFEC in Juneau and is archived in a large warehouse. We have physical fish tickets going back to the 1960s, and we have a very robust data set that goes back to 1975 and continues to be updated on a yearly basis. What we do not have, and the reason that I am here today, is that we don't know what the costs are. In 2023, a total of 444 Prince William Sound drift gillnet permits fished, catching around 30 million pounds of salmon and making an average gross income of $61,627. The average permit price in 2023 was about $99,000. $61,000 isn't a lot of money, especially when you consider that this is gross, not net. And so the reason that I am here today is so that I can try and get an answer to the question from the members of the fleet and the participants in the fishery, specifically, what are your costs? To this end, CFEC has recently sent out a survey to all Prince William Sound permit holders in the drift gillnet fishery that we have email addresses on file for. This survey will run until the end of the fishing season, at which point myself and my staff will start to call individuals one by one who we don't have email addresses for, as well as individuals that we have not received a response from. This survey is very short, consisting of just over 10 questions, and is designed to get the maximum number of responses from permit holders. We will also be contacting vendors in the area, fuel vendors, harbor masters, and more to get a good handle on what other costs permit holders do incur to participate in this fishery. If anyone has not filled out the survey, I would encourage them, please check your spam email. It might be in your spam email folder. And we're also going to be sending out another reminder tomorrow morning with another link in that email. The more responses we get, the better. Statistics is necessarily a numbers game. So we need as much information as we can get. So far, we've sent emails to about 450 individuals, and we've received 120 responses. Finally, I want to touch on the management optimum number. So the total optimum number, the overall optimum number, consists of a balance of both the economic optimum number, which is what this survey is working to assess, as well as the management optimum number, which is the number that ADFG management biologists feel comfortable prosecuting a fishery with. So we'll be in contact with the department later on. There will be a formal memo drafted and sent through the commissioners that should matriculate down the management biologists in the next few months. So any questions from anyone up here?
Go ahead, Darren.
So in recent years, we've had some latency in our permits. How is that taken into account with all this data you're accumulating?
So I'm surveying everybody, even the latent permit holders. The amount of latent permits that we have in this fishery is probably a little bit above average, right? In every fishery, there are people who move on, who take seasons off for different reasons, or permits are inherited, or sometimes they get held up in estates. Typically, you see like 5 to 20%, and I think we're a little bit over that right now. There's a little bit over 100 latent permits. That's an indicator to me. If people aren't choosing to fish, that's typically an economic decision, which says to me that they're choosing not to fish because they don't think they could make any money at it.
And yeah, I guess I'm just reflecting the grosses for the past couple of years of the latency. I mean, I guess say average is 50,000 last year, but there's 100 latent permits. How do you take that into account if those 100 permits participated? Because it would obviously bring the average down.
So what we're doing here is basically we're setting up, I guess you'd call it a normal distribution, right? And what we're saying is like, so where's this distribution going to be based upon the number of permits? So the way that we get that information is by surveying everybody to get their costs. We already have their earnings, and then we can adjust basically the model. You adjust the number of inputs, the number of permit holders, and that's gonna move where the distribution is. So the number of permits is something that definitely affects the model, but the number of latent permits isn't an input. Like we're running this model based upon the hypothetical number of people that would actually be fishing and generating income. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I'm following now.
Okay.
So, thank you, Reed.
Yep.
Thanks, Darren. Any other questions for Reed right now? Go ahead, Jeff.
What was the last year a study like this was done?
So last year there was a study for the Kodiak food and bait fishery. The Board of Fish passed some regulations recently at the statewide meeting that meant that those optimum numbers would not be adopted by CFEC. So the study was published, but there was no action taken on it by the commissioners. That's something else that I should touch on, right? So once these optimum numbers are generated, this is something that there is lots of time for public input. So if people want to call the commissioners, they can. Their numbers are posted on our website and they love getting phone calls. But they have to vote to adopt them during a public meeting. So there'd be a proposed regulation and there would be time for the public to comment on it after the study is published.
And has there ever been a study like this done for Prince William Sound or Area E that you know of?
No, not for Prince William Sound. There are 3 that have been done in the state. One of them being Bristol Bay. The other 2, I don't know off the top of my head. I apologize.
Okay. Thanks. Go ahead, Darren.
In a typical timeline to complete this study, is it
About a year.
a year? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Any more questions for Reed?
Thank you.
Looks like you're clear. Thanks, Reed. Thanks for coming down. All right. Next item up, we've got public comment, 3-minute limit per person. And if you have a comment, jump up, state your name and for the record, and we'll hear your comments. Oh, yeah.
Here we go. Per Nolan, Gilnetter. Heard a lot of data today. And after the Board of Fish, I did some data too. I don't have it with me. I didn't realize it. I probably should have brought it, but might as well start with you. So the slide that showed when you were talking about the 3 things that personal use kind of gave up, and one being moving the date, hard date of the 10th. And I do believe, which the slide wasn't up there, a 10-year average, it opened on the 9th. So that's, 1 day. 80% of the dip netters did not catch a king, but they caught a lot of reds. So I'm not sure how much the king affects the quality of life for a personal use fisherman when the 80% of them don't even catch a king. And then that'll lead me into the actual what's going on with kings from my perspective. One thing we have are a shrinking of the kings over time. So if you go to the management reports, you'll see a direct correlation with the average weight of kings dropping. So biologically, I don't think the king run cares what size the kings are. And I'll give a good example of the Piswak Reds that came back really small. And I went around and around with George Koval over this about taking broodstock from small reds doesn't mean we make small reds come back. So it's a different biology than like big humans making more big humans. It's not the same with fish. So the small kings are going up the river. And a good example is the processors, my processor doesn't want to buy kings less than 10 pounds. And I can understand that. I can understand the marketing aspect, and I can understand a Dittner saying, I don't want a 7-pound king. Maybe I just throw it in with my reds, who knows? But the fact is I kept, all the kings I kept, which was probably like a dozen, probably averaged between 6 and 9 pounds. But we don't weigh the kings. We don't weigh our home pack kings. So we don't, and I can't get the data on what a king weighs this year, but I think it's, if we say they're heavier than they are, then it's less kings, which hurts us, and it hurt us at the Board of Fish. So the fact being is there's most likely more kings, because if I'm catching, the amount of kings I caught was pretty small compared to my home pack. So
to sum it up, can I sum it up for you? You're saying that Fish and Game ought to adjust their size on the sonar?
well, I did have, I'm not exactly sure how the mark and recapture program releases the smaller reds. I mean, I don't think you want the reds in the box, right? So the
Right.
reds get through slats. Is that correct, John?
In the fish, in the live wells?
Yes. So
Escape panel.
would a 6-pound or a 7-pound king go through those slats?
They're designed to lose any king that's smaller than 500 fork length.
What's the average weight of a 500 fork length?
Tell you that off the top of my head.
14, 13,
12, yeah.
12. So anything under 12 is not being counted
Right.
in this scenario. But yet, if we weighed our home pack kings, you would find, and they're not blackmouth kings. We've had years where they're blackmouth. I was skeptical until I ate one, and it's a king salmon.
Yeah, right.
They're awesome, but as a marketer, you can't market them. So,
Yeah. Well, thanks for
Anyways,
bringing that
so-
up here. Appreciate it.
all right. I think I could go on, but.
Any other public comment out there? Don't be shy. Go ahead. You can ask.
Ray Renner, commercial fisherman. I just had a question about the Aries sonar and what the downside to the count from that is. Is there a issue with overcounting kings, or is the percentage of uncounted small kings the area where we're like, what, I guess, why isn't that data being put out there and used more to in-season management? Because based on the technology, it sounds like the kings are a certain amount. You're not, I mean, like Darren had mentioned, there's no reds 13 pounds. If there is, I mean, maybe one. And so why is that 30,000 not a hard number? Because that's what went by that sonar. Is there any doubt in that number?
So Ray, I would say that, Jenny mentioned this earlier, that that's still going through biometric review. We've only got 7 years worth of comparative, in-season apportionment estimates. I think that the theoretical side of it, the measuring fish at a certain distance from the sonar is pretty solid. I mean, you're just looking at basically a known, you've got a certain resolution of those, that multi-beam sonar, and you're just measuring a known like pixel width at a distance from the sonar. So that's all pretty solid. You do have issues with image quality. It's the copper is a very turbid river. The further out you go in that range, the fuzzier the image. And so, that definitely degrades our ability to measure fish at, further distance, at least to a certain extent. But, yeah, I really think it's just, it comes down to the fact that we are progressively using it more and more. And, we're just kind of getting to that point now where it's going through review and, yeah, and as you mentioned, we're, at least a year out from having that evaluation done. But we
Okay.
will be using it in season.
Okay, yeah, because it's just hard to, I know the native fish wheel, there's a lot of air factors in it, based on weather conditions and whatnot. And on the Aries sonar, I mean, what's the percentage of confidence in your 30,000 do you have from last year?
I mean, yeah, that's a tough one to answer without the biometric review, really. I mean, we have air bounds on the estimate. They were definitely tighter than what what was produced for the mark recapture, but that was just, that's one example, one season.
Thanks a lot, Ray. All right, we got one in the back. See you, Kels.
Rita Spahn, Gilnetter. I just have to speak on behalf of the other small boats in the fleet. The difference between, I obviously understand the concerns and the complications with the management when there's a small Chinook prediction compared to a large sockeye prediction, but the availability of Egg Island is huge for small boats in the fleet. That's oftentimes the only safe place to fish in big weather openers. So just want to speak on behalf of the 27 footers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rita. Anybody else out there? Any more public comment? Oh, there's one.
Jason Lee, for the record, I'm a gill netter. Jeremy, we talked earlier in the winter about data from 4 or 5 years of Chinook samples and essentially what river systems those were going to. And the funding was secured earlier in the winter. And have those tests been run?
So I believe you're referring to the genetic stock ID.
Yeah, that's it.
So Jenny might have a little better idea on where we are with the most recent round of samples being analyzed.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, so we received funding to both analyze the backlog as well as through the 2027 fishing season. They have started analyzing the backlog. Those are not complete or available yet, but we anticipate that those will be available by this upcoming December.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I think just the fleet, just to summarize the fleet and specifically my concerns, we're looking for just objectivity. These kings are really hard to enumerate and yet they're so consequential to our livelihood because it's a mixed stock fishery. And so we, as just a harvester, we want to see just numbers and something we can count on that respect. Because at the Board of Fish, just to summarize kind of from my point of view, it seemed like there was a few upriver users who came who struggled to get their fish and for whatever reason. But the data point there on the Chistochina with those users was very small. And it seems like large implications, almost like kind of like the states feeling shockwaves from the king, where king fisheries, whereas I'm not saying we're a shining star, but in some ways we are. We're actually meeting or really, really close to the escapement. And so to have what happened to us was very significant, and where maybe other user groups haven't shared that burden of conservation. And then I guess one last question for Tracy. Thanks for joining us. We've seen the department run like how to dip net salmon campaigns in the past. And specifically from board member Carpenter's comments, he kind of charged the dip netters to find your own solutions to safely return king salmon, because that's the big hot point issue here. Would you consider running like an educational campaign to just, I feel like with those users, like a little bit goes a long way with you know, their actions really help. Like, do they know that the Kings are in severe decline? You know, I'm sure most of them do, but a lot of them might not. And after seeing, sorry, I get really nervous. It's just not my job, but we've just seen like how to catch dip net through the department, and maybe like how to safely return a king salmon would go a long way. Yeah, just that would help the burden of conservation, you know, to those user groups.
Yeah, thanks for the suggestion, and I'll definitely pass that on. You're correct that we'd have dip netting videos, and I'm not sure if it speaks to, you know, safe release. So.
Thanks, Jason. I see Danny Carpenter put his hand up.
I had a question for Jeff. I think there's a precedent for doing cost recovery at Chalmers. In past years, it's been a problem because the seine fleet has had it, and that would complicate the fishery. Could you see doing any cost recovery this year, since the gill netters will have that fishery? And I'm concerned about having Main Bay closed down for an extended amount of time and affecting the quality of the fish. A season or two ago, the bay was closed for an extended amount of time, and by the time it did open, most of the fish inside the bay were pretty poor quality, and the price went down significantly. And I just wonder if there might be an opportunity to try doing some cost recovery at Chalmers while one group has the fishery. And then for Jeremy, I think seems like you mentioned it, but this year is really different from the last 5 or 7 years. There's no snow on Hawkins now, and with this fishery being late this year, there's been past seasons where the peak of the red run was as early as the 18th or 20th. And so I hope you're considering, with the fishing time and area and whatnot, that we could have a really strong run right off the bat. And I don't know how soon the sonar will be up and going to where you'll be able to tell what's going on upriver, but I just hope that you're considering the weather, because in the last 4 or 5 years, there's been a freak out about the fish not being here. And I can remember several times hearing there's no possible way from the director that the run could be this late. It was. And I think, you know, there's a possibility this year that the run could be early or more normal. And I just hope that you're considering that, even though I know you're concerned about the king situation. That's all I have.
Thanks, Danny.
Yeah, thanks, Danny. And absolutely, we are considering that. And, you know, so I think the sonar will probably go in quite a bit earlier than we've seen in recent years. And so, you know, any early entry into the river, hopefully that'll translate into some earlier passage by the sonar and already, you know, counting some fish that are well within our anticipated, you know, range for the date. And being flexible, even though with that first period, if we've got an exceptionally large number of sockeye, you know, in that first 12 hours, there's always a potential for, you know, an extended period, or throwing another period into that first week to try to provide opportunity on that, on that additional, that surplus that's available in the district.
Taking advantage of the price situation prior to Memorial Day is pretty critical.
Thanks, Jeremy. Jeff, did you want to answer that Chalmers cost recovery question?
Yeah, as far as cost recovery and Chalmers this year specifically, I'm aware of at least one time that cost recovery was attempted, and I've heard different reasons why it wasn't successful. But doing cost recovery at Chalmers was part of the winter discussions this year, and it was not part of the approved plan. The plan will be to take a portion of Main Bay and then a portion of Wally Nuremberg as well. So nothing's planned for it this year, but it was discussed.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. All right, any other, see you, hand up over there, Kelsey.
I'm Mike Adams. I got the red pack. And Jeff, so my question to you specifically is, when's the last time this fleet has had access to the Esther subdistrict? I mean, like, not just 1 or 2 days. Because the reason why I'm asking this question is that used to be like a major part of my income. I'm talking south end of the pass, Squaw Bay, over to the gravel beach, not above it, not that area in the tanker lane, but actually in, and when I say tanker lane, I'm talking about between Coros and the Rock. And so I'm hearing you say that this is a bad year for Esther. Am I wrong hearing that?
I certainly didn't say it's a bad year. Are you talking about the forecast for this? The
Yeah,
forecast
because
is lower than normal. Yeah.
Because what's going through my mind is, okay, we've been removed from basically, you know, the mark, you know, the sticks, right? The markers. And then that was kind of a kick in the gut. And now we're being removed from the Esther sub-district. Now, okay, go fish Chalmers. Well, yeah, okay. Every other year or whenever it works or whatever that is. But traditionally we fished the Esther sub-district like it was our fishery. And my question is what can be done to do that, to return to that Esther sub-district? And I know there's lots of, I think that's the beauty of our fishery really is you've got so many different areas that you can concentrate and try to make a living at. But it just feels to me like we've given up. Now we're giving up more time in the spring. Now we're giving up, I mean, we gave up the sticks. Now we're giving more time in the spring. We've given up Esther sub-district. And as a, you know, as a guy that loves this fishery, how do we get these areas back once they're given up? That's a question for you too. You know, so that's my comment. Not a public speaker either. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. So Jeff.
Yeah, so I don't have in front of me when the last time the Esther sub-district was open for more than just the few days that you referenced. It's been opened towards the end of the season, but I know that's not what you're asking about or what you're speaking on. But as far as giving up an area, that is not at all what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the run entry each day, where we're at in our cost recovery efforts, and that run entry is what's specifically important. And so the Esther sub-district is something that I work with Jeremy on closely for every single recommendation, and it's always on the table, opening any area in the Esther sub-district if cost recovery is progressing as necessary.
All right. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh,
You want me to?
sure. If you want to respond to that, Jeremy.
So for, to get back into some of these areas that we used to traditionally fish, I mean, really just need consistently more fish. I mean, larger Chinook salmon runs on the Copper. That's really driving the area adjustment strategy for within the district. Sockeye we can manage with, shorter period duration, longer duration, just depending on the run strength. So yeah, this is just a process of adaptive management. It's kind of how we've gotten to where we're at. And unfortunately, we're largely making or getting close to our escapement goals, but that's what it's taken to track these runs and also to account for changes in the fishery, the level of participation, the effectiveness of the gear. The fisheries just had to evolve.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. Any more public comment?
On the start date for the Copper River Flats, I heard May 22nd. I think Darren said it, and so did Jeremy. So am I confused? Is it really, the 22nd is a Monday this year, but the date is actually no earlier than the 21st, or is it the 22nd?
The way the regulation is written, it's something like through the 21st or anyway. So the first possible date is the 22nd of May in years moving forward. So this year it happens to fall on a Thursday. Next year it could be on a different day of the week.
Yeah, so it can't be opened before the 22nd. So the 22nd is the first possible opener for the season, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, thanks. All right, any more public comment out there? Kelsey, did you see anybody online? I didn't see any hands coming up, did you? Okay, anybody else here? Okay, thank you all for your questions and comments. Next item up is the 2026 calendar to schedule next year's meeting. That's on page 15 or 16. So how about May 6th next year?
Sounds great. Yeah.
May 6th sound good, everybody? The Wednesday?
Just,
Okay. Make it so.
sorry.
All right, next item up.
Task force member comment.
Yeah, thank you. Task force member comments. We'll start down there at Rich Wheeler. Any comment, Rich? Nope.
Nope, I appreciate all the work you do. And I enjoy giving you a call and you answer my phone calls. And so I do really appreciate that. So thank you.
Thanks, Rich.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no comment, just wishing you all, successful season.
Thanks. Jeff?
Yeah, some of the folks have already left from the public, but I just wanted to thank them for showing up today and asking questions.
Great. Thank you.
No comments, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Hi.
Don?
Yes.
3 minutes. No, just kidding. Go ahead.
Yeah, so speaking for the native village of EAC, there's a lot of heartburn over the changes to our fishery that occurred since the last Board of Fish meeting. And I think there's a few things that ought to be said about that in this forum. The first is that, Jeremy, you've done a really good job figuring this fishery out over the time you've managed it, and you've had done well with the flexibility they've afforded you. And I think it's a real shame that it may be perceived as your fault that people aren't fishing early in the season, and I hope that doesn't happen. But I really appreciate what you've done to figure out the early part of the season, and I think it was really successful. And it's a shame that that's been taken out of your hands. So thanks for what we've done in the past, and I hope we can get back to it. The issues around the subsistence fishery, I didn't bring a recommendation this time because, there's no point in repeating them. They're the same that they've been. The subsistence fishery is the most conservative subsistence limits in the state. We have arguably the greatest barrier to access in that you need to go hand haul a gill net off of probably a river skiff. There's an idea that it's just the commercial fleet. Clearly, the Board of Fish thinks the subsistence fishery is just the commercial fleet out there with a third of the gear. And I don't know, I think there's a lot of education and outreach we can do to to do something about that by the next meeting cycle. But the idea of adding time and area restrictions to the subsistence fishery just will not make sense to me, no matter how it's pitched. The limits exist. It shouldn't matter whether you get a subsistence fish on a Tuesday or on a Saturday or on a Monday. You got a household limit. You should be able to catch it when it's safe to do so and when you're able to do so. Understanding that there are issues with commercial, the perceived issues is that commercial users are going to retain subsistence fish and sell them at their next opportunity. There's a lot that can be done about that. That's a law enforcement issue, and law enforcement may have difficult jobs, but one might start with the idea that the penalties for doing that are economical. A person interested in making extra money is likely to have a positive economic experience selling subsistence fish during a commercial period because they don't get much of a fine. So I would say that if those penalties were a little bit harsher and the more stringent penalties available were actually given to people who were caught doing that, you might see people not favor doing those sorts of things anymore. I don't think that we ought to be limiting the subsistence fishery because nefarious people are acting in nefarious ways and law enforcement struggling to keep up with them. There's better ways to deal with that. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Trey.
Yeah, thank you guys for being here. I just reiterate that at the AC meetings, the air sonar comes up a lot, and just reiterate that we'd like to see, as there's king restrictions and we see our fishing time reduced, and I know it's a statewide issue, but just king enumeration. I mean, we'd like to know that the numbers are bad or good, and that's why we're being shut down, not large margins of it. Yeah, just last year, for example, it's a struggle to get moved back a week, and the confidence intervals on the fish wheel were very bad, and so I think just more use of the air sonar. I'd like to see that.
Thank you. Darren?
Yeah, I just said thanks everybody for coming and discussing everything, but I just want to make one comment from just the unintended consequences from the Board of Fish action of closing us a week down. It's just flat out made managing this fishery more difficult because they took away Jeremy's most effective tool of assessment, which is the fleet. And I just want to get that on record. And thanks everybody.
Thank you. Zeke?
Thanks for coming, everybody. I look forward to a good season. I think we got a good forecast, and yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Yeah, I want to thank everybody for coming. I thank the public for showing up. Thank Fish and Game to show up, sit in the hot seat for a little while. Thanks CDFU for hosting this, and yeah, good luck to the fleet, and be safe out there. And the next one of these is, I think, do we have one of these in the spring? May 6th next year, 2026 will be the next one. And with that, let's see, I think we're down to, I need one more motion.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Without objection, we'll adjourn. Thanks, everybody.
Be good to have them here. Put them in the hot seat for a while.
May 6th.